Mein Gott, was sind das für Fahrzeuge? Sie kommen ja direkt aus dem Wasser.
September 19th, 1944, 0730 hours, near Besson-la-Petite, Lorraine, France. A heavy blanket of fog smothered the rolling fields as Panther Commander Oberfeldwebel Karl Hoffmann pushed his face against the cupola, staring into a wall of pale grey. Visibility was barely 30 meters. His fingers shook, not from the cold, but from the impossible sight he had just glimpsed through a thinning patch of mist. For a heartbeat, a strange American vehicle had appeared like a phantom, low, fast, and unnervingly quiet. It fired twice, 2 flashes, 2 thunderclaps, and faded back into the fog before Hoffmann's gunner could even bring the turret halfway around. 50 meters away, the burning ruin of another Panther confirmed that this was no trick of the imagination. That morning, 42 Panthers of the 113th Panzer Brigade advanced confidently toward Arneville. The Panther, with its long 75mm gun and well-angled armor, was the pride of German design. Engineers repeatedly insisted that American tanks were poorly built, slow-witted copies of better Soviet ideas. Many of these men had fought on the Eastern Front and believed they understood tank combat better than any opponent. Yet here, in the fog of Lorraine, their assumptions were about to collapse. They were facing a machine unlike anything they had encountered, the M18 Hellcat, a vehicle whose existence shattered the logic of armored warfare. Only after the battle would they learn its name. On this morning, they knew it only as a ghost that struck with impossible speed. The M18's origins came from a radically different American philosophy that took shape after Pearl Harbor. Lieutenant Colonel Andrew Bruce of the Tank Destroyer Center in Maryland rejected the idea of armor-on-armor slugfests. He studied blitzkrieg not to imitate it, but to counter it. Why try to outgun German tanks head-on when a faster vehicle could hit from the flank and disappear before the enemy reacted? Bruce outlined 4 priorities: speed, firepower, crew efficiency, and lastly, armor. German doctrine would have placed armor at the top of that list. American engineers flipped the equation entirely. Early prototypes ranged from light 37mm gun carriers to multiple evolving designs, eventually settling into the T-70 program, soon renamed the M18. When the first production models rolled out of Buick's plant in Flint, Michigan in mid-1943, they represented a concept the Germans had never considered: a tank destroyer engineered like a racing machine. Its Wright R975 radial aircraft engine, the same used in Shermans, propelled a vehicle weighing barely 20 tons. On ideal ground, the Hellcat could reach 55 miles per hour, and accounts from testing crews insisted it sometimes pushed closer to 60. This wasn't simply faster than German tanks. It existed in an entirely different performance class. Panthers, which struggled to exceed 29 miles per hour even on roads, could not hope to match an M18, sprinting across broken fields at nearly twice their speed. German armored doctrine had always emphasized survivability. Their tanks grew heavier, thicker, and more powerful with every iteration. The Panther, introduced in 1943, weighed 45 tons with frontal turret armor up to 100 millimeters thick. The Tiger II, entering service the following year, reached 70 tons and enormous armor values. But American tank destroyer doctrine, spelled out in FM 18-5, explicitly rejected that approach. Tank destroyers were not meant to trade blows. They were meant to respond quickly to breakthroughs, attack from unexpected angles, and relocate before a counterattack. The M18 was the tool built for that vision. The Hellcat first saw combat in Italy, where the narrow roads and harsh terrain seemed unsuitable for such a fast machine. Yet even there, German units recorded unusually quick American vehicles striking from odd directions. These reports were isolated and never properly analyzed. German intelligence in France, expecting conventional Shermans and M10s, completely overlooked what the M18 could do. By the time the 704th Tank Destroyer Battalion moved to support the U.S. 4th Armored Division near Aracourt, the Germans were preparing their own armored thrust. The 113th Panzer Brigade, formed on September 4th with 42 Panthers, included many Eastern Front veterans. They expected to crush American resistance and push through the fog toward Lunéville. They had no idea what was waiting. At dawn on September 19th, German Panthers crawled forward at a cautious 5 miles per hour. Lt. Edwin Leiper's platoon of 4 M18 from Company C, 704th TD Battalion, was already hidden near Réchicourt-la-Petite. Engines idling quietly, crews watched the mist. Leiper saw the silhouette of a tank gun barrel only meters away and immediately deployed his platoon. What happened next stunned the Germans. An M18 burst from cover and accelerated so quickly that German crews later swore it must have been sliding downhill. It wasn't. It simply moved faster than anything they had seen. In moments, it was on the Panthers' flank, firing into their thinner side armor, while the German turrets slowly attempted to turn. Within minutes, 5 Panthers were destroyed. Only 1 Hellcat was lost. The disparity in turret performance was critical. A Panther's turret weighed nearly 7 tons and required a full minute for a 360-degree rotation under ideal conditions. In combat fog, with the engine throttled down, it was slower. The M18's turret, weighing just over 2 tons, could swing onto a target in seconds. German tankers were often still trying to determine the Hellcat's direction when it was already firing. Mechanical differences also played a role. The M18, built with automotive mass production reliability, often ran for hundreds of miles with minimal maintenance. The Panther, rushed into production and overloaded with weight beyond its design limits, suffered catastrophic final drive failures. Several Panthers attempting to maneuver at Aracourt broke down without being hit at all. As the fog lifted around 900, American coordination began to show its full strength. Hellcat crews used their SCR 508 radios constantly, calling out German movements, warning nearby platoons, and organizing flanking maneuvers. German Panthers often lacked radio communication beyond platoon leaders. Most tanks fought nearly blind, dependent entirely on what their commanders could see through narrow vision slits. Under Captain Tom Evans, Company C executed textbook tank destroyer doctrine, one platoon fixing German attention, while others maneuvered unseen. German crews mistook this for a much larger armored force. The 113th Panzer Brigade's advance began to collapse by midday. Sergeant Henry Hartmann's M18 alone destroyed 6 German tanks. By day's end, 10 more Panthers were burning, while the Americans lost 2 additional Hellcats. The numbers were shocking. German tanks costing immense resources and labor were falling to lighter vehicles that could be replaced in days. The Hellcat's design also simplified repair. Its radial engine could be removed in under 2 hours. Panther engine swaps took the better part of a day. The Hellcat's torsion bar suspension allowed high-speed travel over rough ground, where German interleaved road wheels were prone to clogging or breaking. Even the transmission gave an advantage. The M18 used a Buick-designed automatic system, while Panther drivers struggled with manual gearboxes requiring skill and constant attention. As the Arakourt fighting continued through September 22nd and 24th, Hellcat crews pushed their tactics further. Approaching at full speed across open fields, they closed distances so fast that German gunners often missed entirely. Panthers could hear them coming, but could not traverse fast enough or accelerate quickly enough to stop them. On September 24th, Lieutenant Colonel Creighton Abrams coordinated a combined attack. Shermans drew German fire head-on, while M18s swept through concealed routes to strike from multiple angles. The effect was devastating. Panthers engaged the Shermans, unaware of the Hellcats rushing toward their sides. Within moments, the Germans found themselves trapped in crossfire. By September 25th, German High Command was forced to acknowledge what was happening. General Hasso von Manteuffel issued urgent instructions: avoid movement, avoid open maneuvering, avoid pursuit. He effectively ordered Panther crews not to fight the Hellcats on their own terms. A tank designed as a mobile hunter was reduced to static defense. When the Battle of Arakourt ended, the results were decisive. The 704th Tank Destroyer Battalion claimed 39 German tanks destroyed. They lost only 4 M18 beyond repair. 3 more were damaged but recoverable. The kill ratio stunned German analysts. The Hellcat proved its worth again during the Battle of the Bulge. M18 raced ahead of German advances, reaching key road junctions before Panthers and Tigers could secure them. Team DUKWs' dash to Noville, one of the few times Hellcats reached their top highway speeds, disrupted the timetable of the 2nd Panzer Division. Again and again, German armor found itself outmaneuvered by American vehicles that moved too quickly to be countered. By war's end, the Hellcat had the highest kill-to-loss ratio of any American armored fighting vehicle. 526 confirmed kills across all theaters, including 498 in Europe. The European kill-to-loss rate was 2.3 to 1. Overall, it stood at 2.4 to 1. And most astonishing of all, the Hellcat achieved these numbers despite often being used for direct infantry support, jobs it was never designed for. In the end, the Panther and the M18 reflected 2 opposing doctrines. Germany believed in armor, firepower, and survivability. The United States believed in mobility, flexibility, and combined arms. At Arakourt, in the fog and fields of Lorraine, the faster philosophy prevailed. The M18 Hellcat proved that speed itself could be a weapon, one powerful enough to break the myth of German armored invincibility. March 6, 1945, 3:47 p.m., Cologne Cathedral Square, Germany. Feldwebel Karl Hoffmann pressed his eye to the shattered periscope, its glass spider-webbed with cracks, squinting at a tank silhouette he didn't recognize emerging from the rubble-choked streets. For 3 years, he had memorized every American profile: the high-riding Sherman with its 75mm gun, the Stuart light tanks the Germans mockingly called toy Panzers, even the rare jumbo Shermans with extra armor that still couldn't breach a Tiger's frontal plating beyond 500 meters. But this was something else entirely. "Das ist kein Sherman," he whispered into the intercom, voice trembling. His crew had never heard him like this. Through the fractured optics, he saw a massive barrel, longer and thicker than any American gun he had ever encountered. The hull sat lower, sharply angled, with sloped armor that looked cast rather than welded. The turret dwarfed the chassis, almost as if someone had mounted a heavy anti-aircraft gun atop a tank. Hoffmann's mind raced through recognition charts, silhouettes, intelligence notes. Nothing matched. In 18 seconds, Hoffmann and his crew would become some of the first German tankers to realize the Americans had created a machine capable of killing them from any distance, in any engagement. 3 minutes prior, Wilhelm Bartelbohr's Panther of Panzer Brigade 106 had learned the same lesson. Its 5-man crew never reported what had destroyed them. The M26 Pershing's 90mm M3 gun spoke first. The armor-piercing shell, traveling at 853 meters per second, crossed the 120 meters between tanks faster than Hoffmann could blink. It hit the Panther's frontal turret face. The 100mm steel plate that had shrugged off dozens of Sherman rounds in France and Belgium split under the impact. The round continued into the crew compartment before detonating, leaving nothing but fire and twisted metal. Allied victory was being rewritten not on maps or battle plans, but in numbers and encounters that shattered German assumptions about their enemies, their homeland, and their cause. German tank dominance had been a fact since the Tiger first rumbled into combat at Leningrad in August 1942. For 2.5 years, crews had lived inside machines that seemed invincible. Their 88mm guns could annihilate any Allied tank at ranges exceeding 2,000 meters. Their armor, up to 120mm on the turret and 100mm on the hull, made them almost immune to standard Allied fire. The psychological effect matched the mechanical advantage. Veterans of Schwere Panzerabteilung 506 described the feeling of invulnerability inside Tigers. Mathematics confirmed it. The Sherman's 75mm could only pierce a Tiger's frontal armor at extremely close ranges and only with perfect angles. The Tiger's 88mm could obliterate Shermans from 2,000 meters. By December 1944, German crews had codified tactics exploiting this superiority. Tigers and King Tigers were positioned to destroy Allied tanks before they closed the distance. One Tiger could halt entire advances. The legendary Villa Boage engagement in June 1944 saw SS Oberscharführer Michael Wittmann destroy 14 tanks, 2 anti-tank guns, and 13 other vehicles in 15 minutes. Though Wittmann would die months before the Pershing arrived, this legacy instilled deep confidence among German crews. Allied tankers, conversely, developed Tiger fever, mistaking even standard tanks for Tigers. Meanwhile, American engineers had been quietly developing a solution since September 1942 under Project T-26. They aimed to end the myth of German invincibility. The M26 Pershing was born from the realization that the M4 Sherman, designed in 1941 to face Panzer IVs, was hopelessly outclassed by Tigers. Its development was a national effort. 14 main contractors, 300 subcontractors, over 50,000 workers in 22 states. Fisher Body in Michigan retooled Sherman lines to produce a new heavy tank with a cast turret, advanced transmission, and the 90mm gun adapted from tank destroyers and anti-aircraft use. The 90mm M3 fired a 24-pound armor-piercing shell at over 2,800 feet per second. The standard M82 round could penetrate 119mm at 500 yards, enough to threaten a Tiger, while the T-30E16 HVAP round with tungsten core could punch through 221mm, challenging even the King Tiger. Production was a closely guarded secret. Components were built in separate facilities to conceal the full design. The first 20 Pershings were shipped to Europe under false labels in January 1945. Crews trained in isolation at Fort Knox sworn to secrecy. By February 25th, 4 Pershings were operational. distributed among Sherman units with orders to engage only German heavy tanks. Camouflaged with standard markings, they blended in, though their long guns and low profiles revealed them to trained eyes. German intelligence had no clue. Commanders assumed Americans still relied on quantity over quality. Combat reports began trickling in. Panthers destroyed at long range by an unknown tank with a longer barrel. March 6, 1945, Cologne Cathedral Square. Panther crews positioned behind rubble saw what they assumed was a Sherman with an extended gun. They fired first at close range, the shot ricocheting. 3 seconds later, the Pershing's 90mm M3 delivered the fatal response. The turret burst into flames. Nearby German tanks tried to respond, only to be destroyed by single shots. Signal Corps cameraman Jim Bates captured the engagement, documenting history. The Pershing triggered an intelligence crisis. German officers could not comprehend how Americans had produced a heavy tank with such firepower and armor. Reports described 90mm class guns destroying Panthers and Tigers at over 1,500 meters. Crews called them long gun Shermans. Recognition charts didn't exist. German doctrine assumed American guns couldn't pierce heavy armor frontally. By mid-March, about 20 Pershings were operational. Though small in number, the psychological effect was immense. German crews couldn't distinguish Pershings from Shermans at distance, causing hesitation in every encounter. Production numbers reinforced the impact. While Germany struggled to build 100 tanks per month, America could replace losses faster than Germany could deploy them. Examination of knocked-out Pershings stunned German engineers. The cast turret, Ford GAF 5.8 engine producing 500 horsepower, advanced transmission, stabilized gun, crew comfort, wet ammo stowage, all superior in many ways to German tanks. Morale collapsed. Defensive doctrines relying on invincibility were now irrelevant. Crews abandoned tanks over minor mechanical issues. Units withdrew rather than risk engagement. By April 1945, German armored resistance in the West had disintegrated. Even King Tigers hesitated against potential Pershings. Psychological collapse, not combat numbers, defined the final weeks. Only 20 Pershings saw action, but their existence demoralized German crews far more than statistics suggest. Surrender became preferable to engagement. Post-war analysis confirmed the Pershing's psychological dominance. Crews previously confident in technical superiority now feared the unknown. The American industrial base had matched German engineering while producing far greater numbers. The M26 Pershing's true victory was not measured in destroyed tanks. It shattered German certainty, undermining morale, and accelerated the collapse of German armored forces. The hunters had become the hunted. German tankers never knew the Pershing had a 90mm gun capable of killing their Tigers until the gun spoke for itself. And when it did, the myth of German invincibility died. The Pershing remains a testament to American engineering, industrial might, and the power of psychological warfare. 20 tanks altered the course of armored combat, not through volume, but through the devastating revelation that America could match and even surpass the technical prowess of Germany's finest tanks. March 23, 1945. 2100 hours. Western shore of the Rhine River, near Wesel, Germany. Oberst Wilhelm Steinberg steadied his binoculars as he surveyed the dark river, the lens trembling almost imperceptibly in his gloved hands. Every few seconds, he scribbled short notes into a worn field notebook, observations that would later appear in captured German archives. The Americans have reached the Rhine. our sacred river, yet they will not cross it. This was more than confidence. It was a lesson forged by 2,000 years of history. No foreign army had ever forced the Rhine under fire without bridges. On the opposite bank, artillery flashes strobed the night sky. Thousands of guns firing in a rhythm Steinberg recognized instantly. A massive bombardment ahead of what must be a traditional river assault. German commanders expected days of engineering work, pontoon bridges creeping into place, wide-open crossing points that German 80s could obliterate at will. The Rhine, more than 1,300 feet wide with a ferocious current, was considered nature's final fortress. Even as the Reich collapsed on both fronts, German engineers insisted no army could cross such a river without time the Wehrmacht would use to counterattack and crush them in the water. Across the river waited the men of the British 51st Highland Division, 7th Battalion, the Black Watch, silent, prepared, but not for a conventional assault. No flimsy, inflatable boats shuttling men into slaughter. No fragile pontoon bridges inviting artillery fire. They would ride the river aboard machines German commanders had catastrophically underestimated. Strange hybrid trucks the Allies called DUKWs. German intelligence, having seen these odd swimming trucks in Normandy and Italy, dismissed them as logistical accessories, irrelevant to serious river warfare. A blindness rooted in doctrine, arrogance, and outdated assumptions was about to transform the Rhine, supposedly Germany's greatest natural defense, into a highway of invasion. The roots of that blindness stretched back months. General Hans Speidel and others mocked reports about the Americans' amphibious logistics capabilities. Swimming trucks? A joke. Just more Allied waste, like floating bakeries or ships designed to supply Coca-Cola to troops. Major Hans-Georg Model, son of the famed Field Marshal Walter Model, documented his certainty in his diary. River warfare had rules. You needed overwhelming artillery, major bridge construction efforts, and above all, time. Time during which defenders could pour fire into a confined crossing. Captured German intelligence later revealed Oberst Friedrich Wenzel had mentioned DUKWs in only 3 reports over 6 months, and each time concluded they posed no significant threat. German estimates suggested perhaps 50 to 100 such vehicles in Europe. The truth was astonishingly different. By March 1945, more than 2,000 American DUKWs operated in the European theater, fully trained and organized into amphibious truck units. The British possessed another 2,000 thanks to Lend-Lease. Canadian forces added 800 more. This wasn't a specialized side unit. It was an entire amphibious infrastructure Germany had never acknowledged. The vehicle itself, born of a mishap in April 1942, was proof that American innovation often came from unexpected places. When a Coast Guard vessel ran aground near Provincetown, Massachusetts, engineers realized no standard truck could handle rough surf. That minor crisis sparked a radical solution. Naval architect Rod Stevens Jr., engineer Dennis Puliston, and OSRD innovator Palmer Putnam designed a truck that could drive off a pier and continue straight across water. Ford rejected the idea as unrealistic. General Motors accepted instantly. 38 days later, the prototype existed. June 2, 1942. Built on a GMC 2.5-ton chassis encased in a watertight hull, equipped with a propeller linked to the transmission, featuring the world's first central tire inflation system, the DUKW conquered terrain that tanks and trucks feared. Its name, DUKW, was merely a GMC production code, D for 1942 model year, U for utility, K for all-wheel drive, W for dual rear axles, simple, rugged, reliable. Mass production soared, 21,147 vehicles built by war's end, each costing about $10,750. Yet on this cold March night, German commanders still believed the Rhine would protect them. General Alfred Schlemm's first parachute army, once feared, had been destroyed in the Reichswald, 90,000 men gone. Germany's mobile reserves consisted of exhausted Panzer IVs, battered armored cars, and teenage Volkssturm, with mismatched rifles and armbands instead of uniforms. A letter from Feldwebel Otto Kraus on March 20th reflected their confidence. "We hear their engines all night, thousands of them. But the Rhine shields us. Napoleon himself could not force the river under fire. Our guns own every crossing." German doctrine still insisted the Allies needed 48 to 72 hours before tanks could reach the eastern bank. They believed the river granted them a crucial margin of safety. They believed wrong. Hidden in orchards, barns, and wooded river approaches were hundreds of DUKWs, each loaded with ammunition, radios, engineers, and heavy weapons. Lieutenant Colonel William Thompson of the 458th Amphibious Truck Company later summarized their mission perfectly. "We were not here to ferry soldiers in and out. We were the bridge." Every part of the German defensive playbook, fortifications, artillery, doctrine, relied on one assumption: slowing the enemy down. But the Rhine would not slow them. It would carry them forward. At exactly 2100 hours, green signal flares streaked upward. Engines coughed to life in unison. Propellers churned the black water into white spray. Steinberg raised his binoculars again and froze. The first DUKWs simply entered the river and floated, effortlessly pushing forward through artillery smoke. Then came more, dozens, then hundreds. Infantry assault boats followed. Behind them, DUKWs carried artillery. Behind them, more DUKWs carried tanks ready to deploy minutes after the first men captured the opposite shore. German officers screamed into field telephones, "Impossible! Vehicles do not swim." But they were swimming and bringing an entire army with them. By dawn on March 24th, 1945, less than 6 hours after the operation began, the last great natural defense of the Reich had failed. The Rhine had been breached, not by pioneers laying bridges under fire, not by heroic massed boat assaults, but by trucks that swam. For 2,000 years, the Rhine repelled invaders. On this night, for the first time in recorded history, it became a highway, and Oberst Steinberg wrote the final entry he never imagined he would record. "The Americans have crossed. Our river has failed us." History remembers the giant Tiger and Panther tanks, icons of German engineering. But the machines that opened the road into the heart of Germany were humble DUKWs, dismissed as irrelevant. Germany prepared for a war of fortresses and firepower. The Allies won by ingenuity, logistics, and wheels that could conquer water. The DUKW duck trucks became one of America's most surprisingly effective tools of World War II, a simple, reliable amphibious vehicle that turned rivers and coastlines from German defenses into Allied highways. While German commanders prepared for Panzers, artillery, and infantry assaults, they never expected thousands of cargo-hauling boats on wheels to appear from the water and push deep into the heart of the Reich. The DUKW didn't just carry supplies, it carried victory, proving that innovation and logistics win wars just as much as firepower.